You're live.
Okay, so we kind of.
Okay, so we're back in Senate Transportation talking about veterans license plates. We have a new draft in front of us. Tell us what we need to know. Yeah.
Okay, so this is draft 2.1. The only changes are in 4 places you struck either Vermonters who are or Vermonter who is. So you will see that that language is no longer on page 1, line 10. It now says it is the intent of the General Assembly for the state to properly honor veterans, which includes Vermonters who have served in the active military. So you've got your one reference to Vermonter. I did a search for the word Vermonter, and this is the only place that Vermonter appears. And then on page 2, struck 3 times. It was previously on lines 4 and then 3 places in that subdivision 2. So subdivision 1 will now read, for the purposes of the DMV and the Vermont Office of Veterans Affairs, they need to jointly determine which specialty plate should be offered to veterans, no reference to Vermonters there. And then in subdivision 2, this is for the allowing the means to request a new plate, allow for a means for a veteran to request that a new specialty plate be designed and offered to veterans when an existing specialty plate does not provide for specific recognition of the veteran. So no references to Vermonter there. No other changes.
So the only awards that were listed were the ones struck out on page 3, the Purple Heart, Pearl Harbor,
Yep.
and former prisoners war disabled. I thought we had more, but no. That's just because they had a form that had a lot of.
Yeah, so if you remember when Senator Weeks came in and gave his presentation, and he was saying, like, my 2 goals are to extend it to have the plates be offered for the Distinguished Flying Cross and the other one. And then his other goal was to say, like, look, this is the really long list of what we're offering, but this is the really short list of what's listed in statute. Expand statute to cover everything that's being offered. You went in the other direction to acknowledge and account for the fact that there are going to continue to be more.
Right.
But we wanted to honor the spirit of recognizing veterans who were in combat, which seemed to be his concern.
Yeah. And you've got your legislative intent there.
Yeah. So that took care of that.
2 other quick questions. So we always mention the commissioner, but when we mention the DMV, but when we talk about the Vermont Office of Veterans Affairs, it's just the office. That's just the way, there's not a commissioner. We don't need a name.
No, and like, so if we're talking about ways in which Title 23 is kind of inconsistent, there are a lot of times when it says the department shall do, and then a lot of times it says the commissioner shall do. I think you could change this to be the department shall, and since it's under the, direction of the commissioner, it's the same.
But for the Vermont Office of Veterans Affairs, that we don't need to designate like we do.
I don't think you need to, and I also don't think you need to designate it as being a commissioner. I think it's just a relic of the way that Title 23 has been written piecemeal over the years.
And when you said that DMV and the Office of Veterans Affairs didn't have any changes, did they affirmatively respond, or they just didn't respond?
They both responded.
Okay.
Yeah. So the one thing that was brought up, and I can go through my email just to not misrepresent what anyone said, was a concern about like if they, instead of me trying to remember, I'm just gonna.
Oh, come on.
I don't want to get it wrong.
You're cheating.
I'd rather awkwardly look at my email now than.
As long as they affirmatively said it was fine, then I'm assuming we're out. Okay. Unless anybody has any other questions or ideas. Looking at this, I think this will help with the constituents' concerns on the different places.
I think the intent language actually is a better kind of affirmation of the.
What was the concern of Senator Williams? We combined the 2 bills,
Yeah.
but what part of this is his bill?
Nothing about his bill changed.
Okay.
His bill is.
In the second site of the definition.
But it's in this, but we combined them, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
part of the reason why you don't see all of Senator Williams' bill is because the amendment is saying, add this new section, section 1, your legislative intent section. Keep everything else the same, just renumber the sections, and then make a change to what was section 3 in his bill is now section 4 in the renumbered bill to combine 264 and 256.
Okay.
But the balance of Senator Williams' bill is preserved, and the part of S 256 that came from his bill is preserved.
This,
So part of the amendment.
including the individual disabled during this, my
Okay,
understanding,
right there.
because we talked about 38 USC, that's the part that I'm thinking incorporates well in this bill, right? Yeah.
Okay, so, Bob Burke, who is the director of the Office of Veterans Affairs, said to, Deputy Commissioner Smith, do you agree with paragraph 2 on page 2? Do you want it open for any veteran to request a different type of plate if none currently exist? What would the means for that to happen be? And then Deputy Commissioner Smith said, I think the language is good. If a veteran requests an additional plate, then DMV and you converse and design it. It's really just a decal. So as long as the metal exists, we can get it made into a decal. I don't see an issue. And then I pointed out the fact that it just requires that there be a need to like ask about it, to request it. But it could be that the DMV says, okay, we have a backlog. It's going to take a few months to like design a decal, or you're the only person who's ever received this metal. We have other priorities, but we're getting there. So it doesn't mean they need to offer it. They just need to leave open the way that someone can make the request. And that was my contribution to the exchange with them. And then there wasn't anything after that.
So do you want a motion to move this?
I do.
Okay, well, I move that we move favorably draft number 2.1, Senate Bill number 256, as presented in the draft 2.1.
Okay, any comments or questions or discussion on that motion, or do we want to call the roll?
Want a second?
Second.
I don't think we need seconds.
All right, you know. We don't need seconds for dinner, we certainly.
Well, still have seconds, but don't cut out the zero.
Okay, so we let the clerk.
Yeah, so everybody's ready to call the roll? Senator Chittenden.
Aye.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Ingles is aye. Senator Perchelek.
Aye.
And Senator Mazza.
Yes.
Okay, pass 5-0-0. And who wants to report it? I normally would say
Chittenden
that.
on the,
I would say, yeah, because it's RR and let's
Or you
have
can do it.
no, let's have a D do it.
okay,
RRD, you know, that way everybody can say it's bipartisan and it's all that. So
good. He's on the Guard Caucus. Is that what it's called?
There's a caucus for guards.
National Guard caucus.
I think I said, I wanted to simplify and just have a caucus of everything. You know?
180 of them or so, maybe two.
Yeah,
No.
Two chambers.
they're up in the committees, that's good. Okay,
And I'll give you
so
a section by section summary.
Thank you.
So
we succeeded.
if we do this, and we do this, and we do this,
I'll bring this up now.
somebody's gonna sign it.
You signed up there, they give you a form
Well, can
there.
he sign it or does the chair have to
No, the
sign it?
recorder.
The recorder signs
They'll
it.
sign it, and they don't actually, our roll call, we just put that in our file here, but you need to know what the vote is on their form. Thank you,
Okay,
Anthea.
yeah, no problem.
Yes, thank you.
I'm gonna listen to your testimony on rested breaks and things like that, so let me know if there's anything that comes up from it.
Okay, there probably will be.
Well, you voted the bill as recommended.
Can I
Do we
amend?
vote
Yeah.
amendments
No, we approved the draft.
of the drive?
Our report is what we voted on.
2.1, all right.
2.1, yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have Mr. Church, Bob Church, joining us to switch topics to talk about our favorite automotive parts, the rotors. And so this is, I think, a perennial issue about the inspection manuals, discussion of when rotors fail, cause the rust on the rotors causes an inspection to be a fail. We've heard from Bob Church in the past, but I'll let you introduce yourself and your credentials, Mr. Church, and we also wanted to hear from you. I think mainly because we remembered your testimony in the past about rusted rotors and some language from Pennsylvania. And I don't know if you were told this, but we're looking at making some other small tweaks to the inspection program in in the manual, so we thought this might be the time that we could hopefully improve the language around rust on rotors. But we're also looking at this thing around window tinting and motorcycle muffler stamps. And since you also do inspections there at the Career Center, we just wanted to get your opinion on those, if you had an opinion on those things.
Sure. So for the record, my name is Bob Church. A national industry certified master technician. And I've had the privilege of being a automotive science and technology teacher in a Vermont Career Tech Center, and this is my third year. With regards to the tech center doing the inspections, we no longer are doing that. We had in the past, but we're no longer actually doing the inspection. I didn't necessarily have a presentation. I figured I provided a bunch of links of previous testimony and that type of thing. I think I'll summarize if that's okay, and then go to questions, and if that's how you're feeling.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so the issue with the brake rotors, we did a case study involving a fairly new vehicle that failed brake inspection, legitimately failed. The technician was following the procedures as outlined in the manual and failed it for a surface rust violation. That called into question, where did that regulation come from? And so we did the case study, drew in manufacturers' recommendations that are more associated with the thickness of the brake rotors and their ability to dissipate the heat than it is about the rust condition. So we then looked at other states and what they provided. And as you know, many states have eliminated their safety inspection process altogether. I believe at this point now there's 16 states that currently run an inspection program. And that being said, Pennsylvania had a nice, I thought, if we were going to continue to run this type of process, the language in the Pennsylvania manual where, yeah, the rust is considered, but if it's not impacting the brake operation, essentially the car couldn't fail for brake rust in and of itself. I thought that was a fair addition, if you will, if we're going to continue to do, to give that technician or give the local business some flexibility, especially when they know in their heart of hearts, there's, technically there's nothing wrong with those brakes, but the provision that as it was written, put it into question, and based on the pictures that were provided in the Vermont manual, it made people, so, and that wasn't only just that car. I mean, some cars have rear disc brakes. And if we look at the operation of a brake system, the majority of braking is in the front. So the rear brakes tended to have, technicians were saying, every other year, we have a customer with a Toyota RAV4 and the rear brakes, they're putting in rotors. Well, it's the rust. So just to kind of look at it, that was my main components with the brake rust. The tinting, well, that's a whole nother issue. So previously, before the rewrite of the regulations, tinting was an inspectable item. We were fail cars. But, it's tough for a business, to be candid with you. You have a lot of customers. I think the tinting issue, if you were to talk to professionals in the industry, it's not a little kid thing anymore. It's not a teenage kid that's going to tint their windows and he. You look at some of the vehicles that on the road that have vehicle tint, these are high-end vehicles. I mean, I saw one just the other day. I was at the bookstore in Essex, and this gentleman has a brand new Sierra 2500 HD Denali, and this new vehicle, you can order what they refer to as deep tint, and that's only in the back glass. And what this person did is they had the tint in the front windows kind of blended to match. It's not the super dark, but it had probably like a 20% tint to it, or a 20% vision coming in. The truck looked gorgeous. It's a gorgeous looking truck. I struggle with it because I'm a little biased. I don't really appreciate the tint. I mean, even when my son had his car and he was driving, I was like, I wasn't good for tint personally. But there are a lot of people that enjoy the tint. They can generate valid rationale for including that the tint. In the testimony packets that I sent you folks to have, there was a couple studies I tried to include. There have been studies with regards to the tint effect of the driver's ability for visual targets, but there hasn't really been any studies, to my knowledge, relative to tints actually causing accidents. So it's tricky. Back in the day when we were inspecting cars, to be perfectly candid with you, you would have customers that would, you would say, "Oh, you put the tint on after I inspected the car, right?" Yeah, I did it after I inspected the car. And that's just part of the issues that we deal with when we're trying to run a business, right? So to me, it's complicated. We had a situation back in the earlier days where we had a police officer that noticed a car had tint and was going to pull the car over for the tint, but happened to notice that the car's inspection was coming due. So the police officer waited and pulled this person over a month later after it had a new inspection sticker on, and then tried to, and I could give you the details offline as far as the businesses and so forth, but the bottom line is they went to the inspector who inspected the car and said, "Well, what happened?" He says, "Well, and then they talked to the customer, and basically what it came down to was, well, the customer, it was a hot day, the customer drove the car in, opened both front windows, the inspector didn't notice it, so to speak. I don't want to pray. And so that's how they got around that type of thing. So I don't know what testimony you folks received to change the language that you changed from the old manual to the new manual. But I will say from a business perspective, it's kind of challenging, right? When we look at the data and we look at, is it a safety issue, right? Ultimately, is it a safety issue? I grew up in New Jersey. New Jersey has some tough tinting laws. And those tinting laws are enforced by law enforcement because New Jersey gave up their mandatory vehicle inspections. They don't inspect cars. Mm-hmm. So it's who, if it is a law, then who's going to enforce the law? That's really what it comes down to. But from a vehicle safety perspective, I don't know that you could get consensus on it being a safety issue. I think if you read the federal laws as far as the lighting, and you look at neighboring states with their laws coming up with something that's consistent, so that our local businesses aren't in a spot that makes it so that they can't compete or they can't, it gets tough, right? Because we have businesses that are making a livelihood installing tint. So are we going to then say with a law, well, you can't do that? You can't sell tinting? I mean, it's just, it gets a little complicated. So my opinion is mixed as far as, because I do see it personally, driving a car with tint, it can be a little restrictive, especially in a rainy or a night condition. But again, it depends on the level of tint and the conditions. So
yeah, no, that tracks other testimony we heard.
And then as far as the exhaust on them, I don't really deal a whole lot with motorcycles. Okay. So it'd be hard for me to comment, but I would say it would be the same type of thing that we had before with the tint. Oh, you put that muffler on after I did the inspection type thing or whatever. And to be candid, if you're going to make it so people can't see out their car, you're going to want them to hear the bike, right? So it's something. It's hard to make one judgment call on some of this stuff.
Right. Yeah. No, that's why we're trying to get more testimony. Senator Chin has a question.
If I could jump back to the rotor rust, I had a couple of questions for you, Bob. That's all right. So first of all, I really appreciate the language you brought forward last year, and I definitely support it because it's a perennial issue, as the chair said, the vice chair. It just keeps coming up, and it's just hard for me to defend the current standards. The two other things that were raised by somebody I always go to for expertise on this, who was involved with the last process that this manual was changed, I'd love to hear your reaction to. and I'll put them both on the table, and then maybe you can respond to them. I was told that prior to 1996 or so going way back, we didn't used to require inspections to remove the tires to inspect the brakes. And that one solution might be in concert with the language that you put forward, is to lighten the load for our inspection processes, to just not have them have to take the tires off to look at the brake pads, the rotors and the brake pads, and instead just do a visual inspection from what you can see outside. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then additionally, the other suggestion to address the concerns that I keep hearing from constituents would be the schedule of fines for inspection stations that might violate things that hasn't been changed in 30 years, and it's still at like $200 or so on. Do you think we should look at, not necessarily to enforce it, but to have a bigger stick hanging over the heads of inspection stations to abide by the guidelines that we
That'll
put forward?
send you to judicial.
Any thoughts on those two topics?
Yeah, so one of the videos I provided was a short 1-minute clip from AC Delco on the brake operations, and it's a very simple understanding of how the brakes occur. The fact of the matter is, in Vermont, brakes are inspected multiple times when in a service facility when the people bring their cars in for winter, summer tire changeovers. So you're taking the wheels off multiple times for your customer in a way. So it is true. The inspection process years back did not have you removing the wheel. It was more of a, does the car stop type thing. But the reality is that most cars, when they're coming in or throughout the course of the year, are having the wheels removed. So, you know, I think you could make an argument for not having to remove the wheel for the brake inspection. But, you know, there a lot of times what we tell our students when they're working on a car, they may be servicing the car for, say, a general engine oil service or something like that. You know, there's tricks that you kind of learn to look at the brakes without taking the wheel off as far as the condition of the rotors. There's kind of like little windows, if you will, that the tech could look at. And then if they saw something that was of concern, then they could recommend a brake inspection. And then the brake inspection is another saleable item. And then they can do a comprehensive brake inspection from that concept.
Is there a driving component to the inspection? I can't remember now. Does the technician get in the car and drive it? Is that part of the inspection?
Yeah, that's from my point. As far as the kind of the fine, the penalty, I've been very impressed, frankly, with our Department of Motor Vehicles and their, so if you go to their website, you'll notice that they have the regions split up and they've listed contact information for the inspectors that oversee vehicle inspections throughout the state. And we had a situation last year where we had a person from Franklin County brought a car in for a service and was told they needed rear shock. And they brought the car down to us. And, you know, to be honest with you, I didn't really want to get involved in it, you know. But to make a long story short, customer called, sent an email, and that inspector met that customer, and I was there myself also to look at the car, and they found that the car did not need rear shocks. And the car was inspected, and I'm sure there was some work done at the local repair facility in management because remember, you know, a service technician's compensation is based on what they sell. So it is a kind of a challenging thing when we bring customers. We're mandating as a state to have you bring your car in. You know, it's kind of like going to get a colonoscopy every year type thing. You know, so these people are bringing their car in. So there is that delicate balance. But two things. One, the Division of Motor Vehicles, they did a great job. Secondly, what I thought was very interesting over the course of the year, what we've been noticing in a lot of, especially the bigger car dealer type organizations, but if you bring your car in, a lot of dealers are using a video process to explain to the customer what work they may need. It started out with Audi, BMW. Now it's going down to your Toyota and your Ford, where the technician is basically doing a video conference with the customer. This is why you need it. This is the work that's needed, that type of thing. With regards to the failure of those brake shocks, the shocks piece, what I understand has been implemented in that particular dealer is when if a technician is in a position where they see something that they feel they want to fail the vehicle for, the organization has set up kind of a checks and balance where they have their leadership team, then 2 other technicians look at that car, and then the 3 or 4 or whatever their service leadership team would determine will then either concur with that tech or say, no, that's pushing it, or that we'll just give a advisory like next year you're probably going to need shocks. And so it's more of a, I'd like to think the better half of our businesses, in Vermont, I mean, a lot of our places are mom and pop, and even our bigger franchises, these are our neighbors. So, the sticks and having a bigger fine, I don't know, but I will say I was profoundly impressed with our Division of Motor Vehicles and their inspector network and the leadership that made that happen. And it doesn't look like it would be much. Even when I look at that website, I think, boy, wouldn't that be something to have on every service desk at any service facility, is that kind of chart. They have a picture of the state and they have and if you have a problem, you can contact whoever. And then just even as peace of mind, or even as kind of like not necessarily a stick or a carrot, but basically every customer that's coming to pay their bill in that process, they could say, well, if you have a concern with the rotors or the tint or whatever, you can contact XYZ. I mean, I think that's something. I mean, it comes down to being the person in the messenger, right? You're asking in some of these processes, whether it be the tint or the muffler or whatever, you're asking a business that is trying to service customers and develop a rapport with a customer. You're putting them on the spot for something that is it really a safety issue? I want to try to, it's just a delicate thing. So.
And that happened in my area where there was one station that was failing a lot of brakes. So everybody was complaining. And so similar DMV inspectors said, like, okay, they do track how many fails. And so they did go have a little training at that station, and they didn't fail as many the next year.
No, and that to me says a lot. It says a lot about our organization, right? At the Division of Motor Vehicles. Those folks do a lot of things. So to be able to keep track of that and be able to kind of, come have a little meeting, that's good.
Yeah, just remind them. Okay. And then, so you mentioned your testimony, just so anybody else listening knows, under Bob Church's name on the transportation website is all the different, the videos and studies and things that you referenced here. What I don't see here, although I think we got it from Ledge Council, is that language from Pennsylvania. So I think we have that. And we'll talk about that again. We're gonna have
Pennsylvania or Virginia?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that does have
And we have Captain Davidson, head of the inspection program. They'll come in and we'll hear from him directly.
Short, I could read it if you wanted to, but what do you think?
Yeah, you can read it just to remind us.
So it's like one paragraph. And so I'm looking at it here. This is what we considered last year. It is the intent under legislative intent, rusted brake rotors. It is the intent of the General Assembly that the presence of rust or pitting on brake rotors by itself does not constitute a failure for the purpose of the annual safety inspection required under 23 VSA subchapter 1222, and that inspectors should determine if rust is a temporary condition, also known as surface rust, which sometimes results from the vehicle being parked for a period of time, and only fail a motor vehicle for one or more rusted or pitted rotors that are causing diminished braking performance that prevents the vehicle from stopping within prescribed distances.
Yeah. And then I think we would ask that not only to be in legislative intent, because I think most service techs aren't going to look up the annotated statutes, but we can ask DMV to put that in the manual.
Yeah, I don't think we have all that other requirements in the statute. It's in the.
Right, so we just referenced the manual.
And, and actually, except for when we specify intent language, doesn't make it in anyway,
Yeah.
so, but we can,
Right.
I guess we would instruct DMV
And they could send out a bulletin to all the inspection stations and say this is a new kind of interpretation of the rule, or
Well, we were
they're gonna
changing,
change
we were
the
changing
actual.
another one too.
Yeah, so this is the year to do it, because they already, or they may, if we agree to the other parts, do the other changes. Senator Chin?
So while we have you, Bob, can you just reflect, I understand these changes happened 2017, 2018. What was the world like with brake rotors prior to the changes in the manual that we've been seeing percolate for the last 5 years?
Oh, we didn't have the automated system, inspection system.
Yeah, so I don't think I'd be able to have any, I mean, I could give you an opinion, but I wouldn't have any data that would support anything to say we sold less rotors back in those days. And the reality is that the technology has changed with brake rotors, and the metal that they're being made out of is different. For example, that MDX, the case study, in the past, you used to be able to cut brake rotors. You could bring them and machine them. On that particular car, those were non-serviceable. They had to be replaced. So the technology is changing. And then when we start to look at electric vehicles, you're going to have a whole different type of braking system and regenerative braking that uses the energy of the stopping of the car to recharge the battery. So there's just a lot of changes that way. So I don't think you could make a blanket statement, the prior piece with the rotors, if that makes any sense. I mean, but I will say by adding the pictures, it did make it it was a combination of things. One, we added the pictures with the rust, but at the same time, there was a case in a Barry Montpelier area where they had they charged them with manslaughter or something because they inspected a car or didn't inspect a car, put a sticker on it, and then there was a fatality. So there was a lot more than when you talk about, sticks, if you will, a lot more concern from a technician standpoint, like, boy, I got to follow the book. The book says rust here. So the accurate technician seeing the rust, we legitimately failed that car. I didn't agree with it from a technical standpoint, but if you look at the uniqueness, if you will, of Vermont's regulation there, he was following that regulation. So that was the concern in my thought and suggestion with regards to at least the Pennsylvania language.
They take videos, the station has to take video of what they're doing in case.
They do have to do a lot more with this new process compared to the old process for sure. And as I mentioned, a lot of the dealers are utilizing that, taking it a next step, even with their general service operations, so that, the picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So a lot of times, if you have your car and you brought it to a service facility and they're basically going around it with a video and they're saying, well, you need the tires and you're seeing it and the technician is explaining it. It's a great sales tool, but it also kind of takes away some of the ambiguity, if you will, of the process. So, yeah, the newer process has created some positives with the pictures and the documentation. It's not perfect, but I think I think we'll see more of it. To be honest with you, I think it's a great way for a business because they're basically uploading it to a third-party site and giving the customer a link, so they don't have to have a lot of bandwidth or whatever. You can do it on your phone, and then you have the service technician and you see your car on the lift, and it's a great strategy from a marketing standpoint. And then it kind of takes away some of that. Do I really need brakes? Do I really? It's right there. So it's part of the process.
And I didn't watch the video again, but that test case of the Acura, the MDX, that was only a year old or less than a year old?
Correct. It had 9,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
And it basically, it was a $600 repair. And, that brings into a whole nother thing. We have people moving from other states that have different inspection processes and whatever. So, it's almost like welcome to Vermont now. Here's your welcome to Vermont.
Right.
So it's just, to me, anything that is considered the overall piece of consistency throughout at least New England, whether it's with tinting or exhaust or, because these car dealers are struggling as it is there's a lot of competition. People get on a plane and fly down to Florida and drive the car back, So if it's just trying to make it so that we can be competitive, and that if we're trying to attract more people to Vermont, and they come to Vermont, that they don't get dinged with their car and the expenses that are associated with it. So to me, the consistency, at least within New England, is a critical piece for business folks anyway.
Yeah, and we all have constituents that have had cars that are a year old or less than a year old that have to get these $600 to $1,500 repairs.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And like I said, technically speaking, the manufacturer has no provision in their diagnostic and test procedures for the rust in and of itself. So that's where that language would kind of nullify that in a way. So it's got to be serious. It's got to be something that.
No, I think it's good. I thought your video of that Acura was helpful. People should look at it if they learn more about it. One quick question is, you mentioned about the other states that have gotten rid of their inspection. I do have a couple of constituents that want to follow those states. Do you have an opinion on the overall value of safety inspection or just vehicles?
So I would encourage you, there was a Government Accounting Office safety inspection report that looked at all 50 states, and I'll read it. It's in the packets that I sent. It says, among the 3 studies of U.S. vehicle inspection programs, none were able to establish a statistically significant effect on safety inspection programs on crashes involving either fatalities or injuries. Specifically, the studies examined crash rates in all 50 states and did not find statistically significant differences in crash rates in states with inspection programs compared to those without. And I think it's that report that other states have used to start to figure out whether they would continue to run. New Jersey was a little bit different of a situation. New Jersey's system was state-run. It was a bureaucracy. Under the Christie administration, they cut it. Whether they cited that report, I have no idea. The Vermont Public Radio has done a segments on inspection, and I included the one with the former Commissioner Ide that talked about the money issue with regards to how much money the system brings in and those type of things. So it's a complicated discussion in a way. I think if we look at revenue that's brought in, it's multiple, right? So we could say the state gets $2 a sticker, $3, whatever it might be. But then when you look at those $600 brake rotors and you're requiring every car to come in, there's a significant sales tax revenue stream that is generated through having this mandatory inspection. Frankly, I was shocked that New Jersey cut that out because of the millions of cars that they have. And it would be an interesting study to see how that impacted revenues the reality is, if the people are bringing their cars in the fall to put the snow tires on and they need brakes, they're going to get the brakes whether they had a Vermont inspection or they didn't have a Vermont inspection. It just comes down to is there a value? And it was interesting to listen to those the Vermont Public Radio segments. There's 3 of them. I included the Commissioner Ide's comments in that, but to listen to those folks and the issues about being able to afford a perfect car, and looking at then other states that are no longer doing it, to look at it long term. I mean, it's complicated in a way, but again, how is our business community able to react within New England? What are other states doing? How does it impact? Is where I would be looking at it from that perspective. But the Government Accounting Office study was kind of eye-opening. What is actually the value of this process? What is the cost? What is the value? And the benefit.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Church? All right, we'll let you go back to work or whatever.
Great.
You do.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay, well, we don't have another witness till 10:30, and you're leaving that time.
I should be back around 10:30. I have
Okay.
to go over.
Just real quickly, how do people on the committee feel about this Pennsylvania language?
I think we should consider it. Is this something that we actually have to include in statute?
Maybe, I don't know, maybe then that's, if Anthea is listening, she'll maybe show up and answer our questions.
I
But
mean,
that
in
is,
other words,
I think there's another way of doing it.
I'm wondering, is there another way other
Yeah.
than passing a law saying, make this change?
I'd like to bring some clarity to really where it's at. I mean, I think that there could be a history of some abuse in that system. And, I just don't wanna cast a broad net with that. But I think by having clear language of what it is, it seems just like a simple thing. By putting language in there and describing what's legal and what's not, or what's passable and what's not. It's, and it gives the consumer a tool to say, listen, tell me where this is not just surface rust.
And it seems like part of all these changes were inspecting were issues that involve safety. And it seems like the rust and these they're not safety, they're
Right.
not necessarily. So it seems like kind of a inconsistency here that we've eliminated so many things that are not subject to failure. But we've kept one that in many cases is not really a safety issue at all, particularly with EVs.
It's
So,
not even performance. It's not even performance. It's not even, it's just, there's.
so I guess the question is, do we need to pass a law saying do it, or can it be done administratively like everything else that was in that manual?
I think it will. Captain Scott Davidson's coming in on Thursday, which is tomorrow, so that's gonna be the critical question, how we proceed, I think, on that. But I think we've all heard the stories from constituents about
Yeah.
where it's not, and it's a big hit, somebody coming up with
$600
or $1,500, so
It
it's
is.
on a new car.
It's a big bill. It's somebody's paycheck plus.
Yeah, right. We could prevent somebody from having a car, and that's just a spiral downwards, so. Okay, well, we will take a break from now till 10:30, unless we can get Wanda